Hello and welcome to the first episode of QuiJazz podcast, where we will talk about the technology world and beyond in hopefully a mundane and understandable way. My name is João Simões de Abreu and I'll be your host. In this first episode, we will talk about a subject that's very dear to us, the fact that functionality is not the software's most important feature. The main event is actually how the software is developed. Our guests today are João Penha Lopes, a growth consultant with decades of experience automating processes, and Rodrigo Serafim, QuiJazz CTO and one of the responsible people for the development of Genio, QuiJazz extreme low-code platform that automates code generation. Let me start this off by asking you both. Let's maybe start with you, Rodrigo. Why did someone remember to develop a platform that automates code generation?
Yeah, so that's a story that started quite a few years ago, more than 30 years ago, at a time where developers were kind of a new thing, like software was starting to get its first steps into the industries, into all of the industries, and having a place in every single organization. And there was a severe lack of competencies in computer science, in designing programs, in creating information systems. So at the time, it was a question of absolute necessity for a company to be able to leverage the knowledge of one single person, of one single expert. And the platform came into being in that context. So with those limited resources, we needed to have a way for more people and people that have the knowledge of the organizations of the business to be able to contribute to that software. And because they couldn't code, it was impossible for them to do that directly. They had to talk to somebody, and then that somebody had to collect the requirements, then talk to a technical person. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be the final technical person. It would have to be an architect that would design the solution as a whole, like the several parts, and then it would have to be distributed to all other people. And in that, there's that thing of the telephone game where somebody says something, and then when it reaches the final person, it's something different. Software development is exactly the same thing. The more people that you have to talk to in the middle, the more different the end result will be from the initial idea. So that was the birth of these kinds of platforms. Now the funny thing is, today we have a lot more people that have that training in software engineering, but we still have the same problem of lack of resources because there's a lot more software.
Yeah, I believe that there are like 1 million developers in Europe alone. So yeah, that's the way. Do you want to add anything on that, João?
Of course I want. First, I must correct something, not for those that are only listening, but for those that are viewing. This must be a very credible podcast. And you said, he has decades of experience. Look at me. People that see me cannot believe that. He looks so young, how can he have decades? So, okay, I have a bit of an experience. I agree with Rodrigo when he says that still today the basic problem of people who program conventionally is interpretation. I've done some interesting experiences sometimes in university where you have 10 people in line, one after the other. And the first bloke makes a drawing on the back of the second bloke. The second bloke tries to imitate that drawing on the third, and so on and so on. And they do with a piece of paper. it is unbelievable the difference between the original paper and the last one. So it is when you explain something to a programmer that interprets its own way, and the result is something that is not believable. So I would think that the main reason for such a platform having been developed, the why, is making sure that the result is according to the business expert, period. And although people will say, well, but that looks obvious, should be like that, yes, but it took the imagination of our CEO 30 years ago to place this in practice. Nobody has thought of that. It is not widely used today, but we will come to that later.
Do you want to add anything on that, Rurik?
Not right now.
Not right now. Okay, so going a little back, in the case of Quidgest, why do we automate code generation through models? And moreover, what are the models? I don't know who wants to start on this. Maybe usual.
Well, I think that's Rodrigo's beach models.
Yeah, I can start
Okay.
this one too.
Let's go ahead.
It's more of my
Expertise.
my expertise, yeah. So let's start with what are the models itself, and then if there's any questions, just keep asking me if I get too technical in the details. Because when we talk about models, we are talking about abstractions. So the concept is very simple, but it's kind of hard to understand what it really represents, because we are literally talking about abstractions, right? We are taking something real, an implementation, right? And saying, okay, there's 20 kinds of these implementations. But they all share a common code, a common display, a common behavior, a common effect, okay? And the commonality is the thing that you want to abstract away. It's the thing that you don't want to think about. It's the thing that you want to take as granted. And what you want to focus on is the differences. Okay? In all those implementations, what are the different parts? Okay? And those are the things that go into the model. So the model just says, I want X. I want to use this abstraction. I want this display. I want this database. I want this email message, right? That's the thing, that's the abstraction. But then the model, that's just a name. That's not a model, that's just a name. It's just identifying an object. And now you have the properties of that object, right? And the properties are the differences between all the relevant differences between all the implementations. Okay. So that's what you model. And we can go from there.
Yes, as I see it, because I'm absolutely a nerd in technology, Rodrigo is the expert, but correct me if I'm wrong, since the platform will automatically generate the code in the latest technology, if I draw my models today with today's technology, using the code of today's technology, and in the meantime the technology evolves, once the platform is updated, I can just press the same button and my models will generate the code in the newest technology.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, and this is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
so one thing is the model, the other thing is, okay, now we can explore the consequences of thinking this way. That is one of them. It's
Yes.
not the only one.
No.
I would add that, so what João was telling us is that, okay, now that we have a model and we have abstracted away the implementation, now we have a freedom, which is change the implementation, right? It's like if the common thing is being able for you to go from Lisbon to Porto, you can change the implementation. You can change the way that you go from one side to the other. The end result will be the same. Like
Yes.
you just want to get the same end result. And the technology gets evolved along the years. Like you start going by car, then, or by bicycle, then you go by
Yes.
car, then you go by plane, and
And then you ask Scotty
any
to
day
pick me up.
you teletransport there, right? So that's the same thing in the models. That's one of the advantages. You abstract out the way, you can change the implementation, and you didn't lose any of the knowledge that was embedded in the model. The model stays the same. The second thing is everybody is talking the same way. You've created a language that somebody shares when building two different softwares or two versions of the same software or whatever you want to differentiate. So if you have 100 programmers in your company, 100 software developers, 100 architects, they all have different levels of expertise. They all have different tastes. They all have different competencies, right? So what you get is 100 different solutions. That might seem like a very good idea, but it's like the worst possible
What you get is a
nightmare
nightmare, not
for a
100
software
different
engineer.
solutions. It's a nightmare.
Which is nobody gets to be able to understand anybody else's code. And
Yeah.
anytime you need to solve a problem, you need to find the person that created that problem because that's the only guy that can solve it. And then you get,
And being dependent on one guy is never a good corporate solution,
Yeah,
for all the reasons.
with models you solve that.
Sorry?
With models, you solve that
Yes,
issue, right?
yes, because the models are easily understood by anybody that looks at them, even without technological background, such as me. And they can be fine-tuned, and they can regenerate in the new technology whatever number of millions of lines of code is necessary.
now that's not to say that two different people can't build two different solutions and one solution being better than the other one. What is to say is they will both use the same language and they
Yes.
will both understand the solution that each other built, and they can understand why one is better than the other one.
Not necessarily better, different, because, for instance, when we have proven software modules a long time in the customers, and we pride ourselves that for every requisite that a new customer places to us, we can satisfy 100%. How? Because we take the previous module, we fine-tune it in order to satisfy all the new requisites, and then we regenerate a new solution which is similar but satisfies everything he wants. Again, this can be done by two different people that understand the same language.
Yeah.
And if you have closed solutions, boxed solutions, if the customer says, I would like this more this way, tough luck, mate. Maybe you get lucky in the next version, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. Regarding the decoupling of technology and the model, other than updating software really fast and keeping the knowledge base of the model, what does this mean for the client as well? Because this means that the client can also make sure that the business, my question is, the business people will also be able to develop on top of that, right?
Yeah, so there's two perspectives there. There's a hidden perspective, and there's a conversational perspective, if you will. So from the hidden perspective, for the end client, it's all the same thing. Like if he's only interested in the solution, the benefit that he gets is that it's more likely that he gets the solution that he asked, because we reduced the number of people that need to be talked to until he gets a solution, right? And what we do many times is put the actual consultant, the business expert, talking to the client directly and building the solution in front of them, which leads to the second point that I'll get there. So it can get an immediate response to his requirements and to check immediately if what he's asking is equivalent to what he's getting. So that is the consequence of speeding up the iterations. So you move from a development cycle, which is define the requirements, which with a large block of paper or documents, and then ship it to somebody, and then 6 months later they appear with the solution, to a model where 6 minutes later you get a little bit of your application, you check it, and then you add another little bit and another little bit, which leads to the non-hidden part of this, which is, okay, now that you have the client talking directly to the consultant, well, if the client starts understanding the language that the consultant is using to talk with the software, why not talk in the same language? If he starts understanding what patterns are already embedded in the platform, and he can get them early, and what patterns might need more development, he might compromise on a solution that obtains the same result but uses a pattern that's already there, because it allows them to have a time to business a lot faster. Okay.
Okay. Jean, do you want to add something to that?
Of course. I will leave to the end the direct answer to your question, what about the customer considering this philosophy. I will just illustrate something that Rodrigo mentioned, iterations. A couple of years ago, I always mess up because of confinement. We got an RFP for a public tender for a solution. And one of the questions of the RFP, how many iterations do you need? Oh God, what do they mean by this? And then somebody said, well, probably iterations is they award you the order, the company goes away for 3 months, you say, developing things, come back, show what they've done. The customer said, I want this way or that way, they go away again, and probably those are the iterations they refer to. So what do we write? Okay, write 3 iterations, who cares? So eventually you got the order. And as soon as you got the order, one of the consultants on that line of business modeled the requisites of the RFP. So he modeled, generated the solution, and went to the Mr. X on the customer saying, look, this is what you have requested. Is this exactly like this? No. I need this, I need that. And as the customer was saying what he needed, he was correcting the model and regenerating the old solution. This lasted for less than 2 weeks, 1 week and 2 days or something like that, until the customer said, don't touch, it's just that I want, exactly that. And our consultant asked, you do realize that we had 50 or 60 iterations, although we promised 3 of them. But our iterations, as you saw, are minutes, not weeks or months. If we have written down 50 or 60 iterations, I would not even read your bit, period. So it is deeply embedded in people's minds that a vendor iteration always has to take months or years eventually, if you talk about big boys in ERPs, but that's another story. And our iterations may take minutes and be done in front of the customer. Now, going back, how clients react to this philosophy? It depends where you look. If you look into the upper management, this means reducing costs, usually reducing costs. So upper management will be thrilled by this kind of philosophy platform. If you go into the layer of the established IT management, oh God, this will be a threat for them.
And why is that?
Because all their ecosystem is quiet and smooth. They have their suppliers, they have their customers satisfied. He's satisfied because he ordered from a big brand, so if anything goes wrong, it's not my fault. I even ordered from a big brand, so why should he move? This is a threat. So unless the instructions come from above, saying, I want you to investigate this, middle management, IT management won't move. I wouldn't.
Okay, so why would someone? I mean, how does this approach to developing software compare to the incumbent companies using low-code applications to develop software? How does this compare? Rodrigo, you may start with this one. What I mean by the process of the iterations, the fact that the software development is also really quick. So that's that.
It depends on where you want to go with that question. Like,
I mean,
do you want to go specifically to the differences between no code and low code? Do you want to explore between traditional software development?
I would say the model-driven approach.
Yeah.
How does it compare to the low-code approach, say, from OutSystems, for instance?
Well, yeah. So unfortunately, to understand that difference, we need to go into a bit more technical details.
Okay.
I hope it's.
I'll make sure to ask
everybody
everything. Yeah.
gets a clear picture. So actually, all programming is models.
Okay.
Okay. And the way that you understand this is that computers actually only understand zeros and ones. Okay, it's just 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, and they understand that. And when we do talk to the computers, we don't use zeros and ones because we are humans. We use numbers, we use digits, right? When we talk about numbers, we use digits. So that's a model. A digit, it's a model of a 0 and a 1, of a body of zeros and ones that gets turned into 12, 13, 20, right?
Okay.
So we code the computers with those numbers. Those numbers have a meaning, right? When you want to move a piece of data from one part of the memory to another part of the memory, that's an instruction. That instruction is a number. But we don't like to talk with numbers. We like to talk with words. So we invented a language called assembly. Assembly is a model over the digits. And then assembly is a language that is very close to the computer, but it's very far away from the humans. So we made it a little more close to the humans. And we invented programming languages. We invented BASIC, we invented Fortran, we invented C, and today we program in JavaScript, C#. So that's another model, right? So when we are talking about model-driven development, the big difference is all these models have been focused on the computer. When we talk about model-driven development, the model is focused on the business domain, right? Now, what many low-code platforms do, not all of them, but what many do, and that's usually the difference, is that they just add another layer of abstraction on top of the programming. They make it visual. They make it with arrows. They make it with boxes. There's a very known language in software engineering that is called UML, Universal Modeling Language. But you go to check what it is, and it's data, a relationship, then
It's semantics.
a conjunction, right? And like, not even software engineers like to look at it. It's really hard to understand it. It has tons of levels of interpretation to actually understand a UML diagram. So I would say that's the big difference between many platforms, is that they only add one extra layer of abstraction over the code, while a model-driven development, it's actually model-driven development, is focused on business requirements and getting models that are as close as possible to those business requirements.
Okay. I didn't think that was very technical at all. I mean, you talked about the programming languages and everything, but do you want to add anything on that,
Yes.
João? Okay.
You should have had that question. You know. You mentioned low code and OutSystems.
Mm-hmm.
And OutSystems did a very good job when they created their low code, because they can replace 10 manual programmers. And to explain that, I will go into a bit of technical. Actually, it's all the technical, I know, but I like to mention this. Function points.
Mm-hmm.
Function points is an ISO standard that was republished in 2018, and is a way of creating an abstract numeric value that conveys the complexity and functionality delivered to the user of the software. So, a manual programmer, a good one, while he's working, creating his menus, submenus, buttons, functionalities, tables, fields in the tables, etc., delivers typically 16 function points a month. Then OutSystems came along, and according to their data, they deliver 175 function points a month. This is great. It's more than 10 times the manual program. Then we had, 1 year back, was it, Rodrigo? 1.5 years back, we had to calculate how many function points did our platform generate, because we had an inquiry from Brazil, from a huge company that provides software solutions for the federal government and state governments. And they said, we need your help. We've heard that you can help us because we have already 1,200 programmers and we cannot manage anymore. And our orders are rising. So how can you help us? And we were talking to them saying, describing the platform, they said, we don't care. How many function points do you deliver a month? We didn't know. So we had to calculate. Rodrigo and his team spent a month around that to calculate. And according to the same standards of ISO International, our platform produces 1,330 function points a month. What does this mean? It means that one person using the platform produces the same functionality for the same period of time of 83 manual programmers or 8 OutSystems developers. This is a huge savings in cost. This is the real benefit for the end user. It's not the advantages or the tricky things. This is the real thing. And other from this, and still using function points in low code, the low code area. And I'm not saying low code is bad. No, it's different championships, different things. A complex solution in low code, we're talking about 8,000 function points, the real complex ones.
Mm-hmm.
With our platform of model-driven automatic generated code, a complex solution, we are talking about 90,000 function points. It's a different league. So the big difference between our platform and the others are obviously in the number of persons needed to accomplish a result and the level of complexity that we can achieve.
Do you want to add anything to that, Rodrigo?
Just two small notes. One of them on the actual it wasn't the calculation that took time. It was the interpretation of what function points are that took time. We actually tried 3 different interpretations to see if they agreed with each other. We made some of them calculated directly by algorithmic, others based on interpretations of some people had, and then checking if the algorithm agreed with those interpretations. And they basically agreed, so that gave us a fair assurance that we are
Yes.
calculating a
And-
correct number.
Yes, and the
Right.
fact is that by the end of 2019, we sent a paper to the International Conference of Software Development that at that time took place in Mexico. As you know, these papers are peer-reviewed. So we got 2 emails from a couple of chaps saying, please explain this better or that better. But at the end of the day, the paper was accepted in the conference and is already published on the scientific magazines. So we are not talking about marketing statements or sales statements. We are talking about a platform that has been recognized by the academia and the scientific world.
Yeah, but let me just let me just ask them. I have to ask something because 300 and I mean 1,330. But this is a GNU developer that's been using GNU for.
That comes to the second point that I wanted to add to what João said, which was, then we had a curiosity when we calculated the number was, oh, we have people in training for GNU, right?
Yes.
Let's check
Yes.
in one of the classes, in one of the small experiments that they did, how many function points that calculates, so that we can compare of, okay, what can one person achieve in half an hour. And I don't remember the exact number. I just remember the reaction that we looked at the number and like, this is 3 months of work. No, it can't be. We calculated things wrong. Let's recheck. Let's talk with the people again. Let's see how many tables did they add, what were they creating, what interfaces did they create. Does this match up to our expectations? And like we turned the numbers like 3 or 4 times, it's always the same result. No, this is actually what it is. Like a person in a training section made an application that is worth like 3 months of work of traditional software development. And I don't know how much in the
Yes.
other comparable platforms. And it was like really surprising.
This is exactly true, and you should talk eventually to our academy managers. They can tell you details. I remember that not only during the training on the academy is 1 week, mornings and afternoons, 1 week. And although during the training they produce things, solve solutions, there is an exam at the end of the training, a 2 hours exam if I'm not wrong. And this that Rodrigo mentioned was also measured during the exam. On those 2 hours exam, they produced solutions. The largest was just below 3,000 function points, 2,900 and something. And if you go to the low-code references that are published, 3,000 function points is the beginning of the very complex solutions. So just to tell you that in our trainings, level 1 trainings, the exams easily go very close to 3,000 function points.
3,000 function points. Yeah, 'cause I read something that so a person that goes for a course, that 1 week course, he or she is able to develop something like 450 function points per month. I've read that somewhere, but this is obviously a person with 1 week of experience developing GNU. So
Well, I can give you a personal example. In 2018, my youngest kid was in the August holiday of his 10th grade. And he came to visit me here, and the CEO said, doesn't your kid want to get a training. They said, yes, he's on vacation, so there's nothing wrong on filling up his mind. So he went to the 1 week training. Which
Did he have any previous experience with technology?
No.
Okay.
So, and the company offered his training. So when he finished the training, I said, I'm very sorry, Johnny, but you have to stay in order to pay for the training you got. So he went to one of the departments that had already one bank as a customer. So he sat there and they gave him, look, this bank who is already our customer needs this functionality to be made for them. You do that. And 3 weeks later, I got already tall boy arriving at home and saying proudly, Daddy, I went to the bank today to show what I have developed with Jet supervisors, naturally. It did everything they wanted. Even the CEO was there. 1 week training, 16-year-old boy, no previous experience in programming. This is how serious it gets.
Okay, 16-year-old, I didn't hear that one before. Yeah, we should definitely use that as a testimonial on our academy.
Yes.
Obviously, yes. So going a little back on the way people develop the platform, on why we developed the platform, QuidJet developed the platform. When we created the solution, we detected a market gap. You talked it in the beginning. We didn't have the developers. It was just like the crash telephone game as well. And in a society where there are plenty of courses and certifications to be a full stack developer and a large number of companies profiting from outsourced companies, who are the potential clients for QuidJet? Potential clients for the solutions that QuidJet offers. This is what I mean. Can you start with that, Joel?
That is a very difficult question to be politically correct. There is a huge ecosystem around manual programming. There are lots of companies that make a lot of money teaching people how to program. There are a lot of companies that make a lot of money hiring those resources for a small fee and sending them to their own customers to develop for a high fee. Nobody wants to touch that, obviously. Wrong, because they should look into it anyway. And the end user is always the bloke in problems, because anything he wants costs a lot of money, but it's not even the money, it's how long it takes to get things done. In 2018, there was a row in the IT world about a big distributor chain company that cut it short, a development of an ERP that was being made by a huge name in the market. They were implementing for 7 years a new solution, which had already costed $500 million.
$500 million?
Yes. And the international CEO decided, cut, no more. So, all the ecosystems would need change. But change is difficult, mainly for those that are making money of the existing system. And why should I worry? I'm making money. But the fact is, if you look back in history, and I'm married to a teacher of history, so I should know this. Every other industry has developed. Say, car manufacturer. You had 8 hours, 3 times 8 hour shifts, thousands of workers, even with Henry Ford, his automated chain. And now you see a couple of them there controlling robots. But in the software industry, you still depend on hundreds or thousands of manual keys of keyboards. It's ridiculous. So you should automate that. Even companies that produced produce results, solutions for their customers, if they can hire less people automating the procedure, they can make a lot more money because they don't have to reduce the prices of the solutions. Why should they? If there is a market price for 1,000, they still charge 1,000. But for that same amount, instead of using 100 developers for 3 years, they use 10 developers for 2 months. Better still, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But that is clear for me, but apparently the market is too lazy to change. They will have to, because at the end of the day, the big companies that use solutions will start asking, why is this expensive? Why do I need 100 programmers for so long?
Yeah, this is especially ironic since software was the driver for the changes in many industries.
Yes, except in itself. Except within.
Ironic. Yeah.
Let me just address
Go ahead.
one of the threats that João mentioned to the software development teams, which I think it's important to any software developers that are hearing this, that might hear our talk, hopefully, is that at first it sounds threatening, right? It's
Yes.
your job that's
Yes.
on the line. But I kind of see it as a freedom as well. So what happens is if you have to solve the same problem over and over again, sure, you need 10 people to be able to solve the same problem 10
Yes.
times, right? But what actually happens is that you don't have 10 people solving the same problem 10 times. You have the same person solving the same problem 10 times. And that gets incredibly tiring. In terms of as a career, as a challenge, like having to do exactly the same thing forever, it's kind of not a job, not a career, it's a labor, right? It's something that you do to warm up, right? And what model-driven development offers is the opportunity to just solve the problem once and then move on to the next and solve another problem and different problems. And that actually creates a need for software engineers that are truly competent, that actually own their competencies, hone with an H, right? Hone their abilities. Because, and let me be frank here, just also touch on the non-politically correct part of this. There are tons of people that don't have any vocation for programming because it's a really hard thing to do. You have to have a ton of variables in your mind and have a whole picture of the software so that you develop something that actually makes sense, that's optimized, that has all the preoccupations of software, right? And you just have, instead of that, you have battalions of people that you are trying to train in programming, but you don't have time to give them a course that should probably take 6 or 7 years to actually train somebody in programming seriously with deep knowledge, instead of like teach a couple of programming techniques and okay, go work for somebody.
Yes, and adding to that, and this is why I insist we should educate the top management. For instance, there are now a number of companies in the world whose CEOs decided whatever cars or trucks we buy, they must be electrical, period. They couldn't care less whether the department needs a 4-seat car or a big truck for 30 tons, it has to be electric. Nowadays, there is this prejudice. Oh, software, we need an ERP, right? Okay, send it to IT for the IT to decide. This is wrong. This is so very wrong. The top management should have clear in their minds the benefits of having software developed based in models. And then they should say, whatever software you decide to buy, we don't care, but it has to be generated based on models, precisely to guarantee sustainability, because obviously if you can do the job of 100 people using half a dozen, this is sustainability, and it's much cheaper, much more flexible for the future, because as we just saw, there is nothing fixed in this world except change. So laws change every day, business needs change every day. If there are solutions based on models, you can adapt overnight, so to speak. Otherwise, you wait years. So it is a pity that the top management do not realize this and still pushes to IT everything that is concerned with software.
Do you want any additional notes on that, Rodrigo? We are a little over time. I would just like to ask
Over
you.
time, do I get more pay?
Exactly, yes. Well, if this podcast was done by Genie, we will probably last a little shorter. So how would company? I would like to ask you, because since your 16-year-old son was able to develop 300 function points, you said.
I don't know how many function points. It worked exactly as the customer wanted.
Okay, so independently of that, how would companies benefit from equipping their business people with the development knowledge? I might start with you, João.
Well, for me, company benefits comes down to money, period. If they can assign business people that knows the business very well, the capability of generating their own solutions in-house. Obviously, you don't have to hire outside programmers. You don't have to waste time making sure the programmer understands what your needs are. You don't waste time making the programmer correcting lines of code, etc., etc. So they will benefit. Having said this, I must say I see it useful for large companies, for medium-sized complex solutions. I don't see a company training their financial staff to build an ERP.
Obviously, yes. But functionalities.
But I would see them doing those kinds of things, solutions that usually are not available in the market due to the specifics of that particular company. Yes, I see that easily, and they will save a lot of money.
Yeah, I would add, from a more technical perspective, that the companies have to benefit from the creation of something that we have started calling a knowledge engineer. So what happens is many businesses it's like you driving a car. You don't think about it, you just know that you turn things. But if you had to explain how do you drive a car to somebody, you would lack the language to do it. Many businesses work that way. They kind of work, it works, we know what we are doing, but if you have to explain it to somebody else, they don't have the vocabulary to it. Now what models add a lot to it is the models force you to, like, the models are not magic, right? They have to at least be complete. You can't have ambiguities. Like we haven't taught computers to deal with ambiguities yet. That's to come. We are not there yet. So you actually have to specify every detail, either implicitly or explicitly to the computer, right? So, but this forces as a business to be able to really understand their processes. They kind of know their processes, but they don't understand their processes. And many times, only when we start developing the software and go to them with the model, and we go to the model, I kind of need to answer, is this supposed to be limited by that thing? Is this supposed to be filtered by that thing? Oh, right. We never thought of that. Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't. Maybe this can be automated. Maybe, oh, actually it can't be automated. Actually, it depends on an approval or a decision that needs to be made. So they find out things about their businesses by modeling their businesses. So I think that's one big gain that probably many organizations are overlooking.
Okay. Jean, any additional notes?
Hashtag absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. If you would like to know more about our academy, you can just Google QuiJS Academy. The first page will pop up, will be ours. Make sure to follow our podcast, and thank you very much.